Welcome to the State Winery Order, or SWO, workshop session as part of the Regulatory Alignment Study. CRO will be hosting 2 workshop sessions related to the SWO. This recording will share information on the study's SWO, Regulatory Pathways, or Proposals, as outlined in the Regulatory Alignment Concept Paper released in early May. It will not include any information shared during the live workshop sessions. For the session, we will be covering the following agenda items. First, we will go over an update on the Regulatory Alignment Study, provide an overview of the objectives and upcoming milestones. Then, we will cover the workshop session objectives and share our approach for regulatory alignment and the development of the Regulatory Alignment Concept Paper. For most of the workshop session, we will present an overview of each of the proposed regulatory pathways, or RPs, as divided up by the following 4 focus areas: data and information sharing, efficiencies, effectiveness, and equity. We'll end the session with a wrap-up and next steps. If you aren't familiar with the study, the Regulatory Alignment Study is a 3-year-long engagement with the goal to identify opportunities for regulatory alignment and streamlining processes within the areas of food safety and water quality. At the onset of the study in November 2022, CRO was tasked with 5 key objectives which align with our key study milestones or tasks. The first being to evaluate regulatory requirements. Then, to conduct listening sessions with members of the agricultural community. We completed both of these tasks and will explain each in more detail in a coming slide. Our next objectives are to convene the agricultural community and regulators, which we will be completing through these workshops. To identify and prepare implementation plans, and finally to provide recommendations for technological enhancements, if any. As mentioned in the previous slide, we will be conducting these workshops as part of our 3rd study objective. The workshops will be instrumental in shaping our final recommendations and remaining study milestones, which you can see highlighted in the 3 boxes on the slide. To provide a brief overview of each, in summer 2024, along with these workshops, CRO will be identifying process improvements and implementation steps to support regulatory alignment. In fall of 2024, we will be evaluating and recommending technological enhancements as they relate to our proposals. And finally, by November 2025, we will present solutions and recommend implementation plans, which will include release of a final report. In terms of the workshop session, we have laid out 5 key objectives for these workshops. The first is around effectiveness of proposals and understanding whether the proposals meet the regulatory alignment goals. The second is around implementation challenges and opportunities. Any specific examples you can provide around this would be helpful to our team in understanding the feasibility of proposals from various perspectives. The third is on unaddressed needs or gaps. This includes areas not currently addressed in the proposals, while keeping in mind the overall scope of the study, which is confined to the 4 program areas of the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, the Produce Safety Program, the Confined Animal Facilities Program, and the State Winery Order. Objective 4 is on equity and inclusivity, and how the proposals may impact different groups within the agricultural community, including small-scale and socially disadvantaged growers and communities. Finally, we look forward to hearing any suggestions for improvements of the proposals to better meet your needs. We released the Regulatory Alignment Concept Paper in early May. The paper is available on the study's website and includes our initial proposals or regulatory pathways for streamlining. The paper covers 4 programs in scope of the study, including the Produce Safety Program, the Irrigated Lands Regulatory Program, the Confined Animal Facilities Program, and the State Winery Order. We encourage everyone to read the concept paper and/or executive summary, which are available on the study's website, as they have more details on the proposals we will be covering in the workshops. The development of the paper and the proposals detailed in the paper were based on information and input gathered throughout our study's first 2 tasks, which included evaluating the regulatory requirements and conducting listening sessions with members of the agricultural community. During these tasks, CRO conducted nearly 30 sessions with CDFA and Water Board staff, and mapped 80 distinct processes across the programs and scope of the study. Additionally, CRO held over 70 listening sessions with members of the agricultural community to hear their input and experiences with the state's food safety and water quality programs and regulatory requirements. As mentioned in the previous slide, our approach for regulatory alignment and development of initial proposals was based on extensive research and outreach conducted throughout the study. In considering what regulatory alignment means, we identified 3 different goals, which were validated and reinforced by input we received from program staff and agricultural community members. The goals are to 1. Empower the agricultural community through streamlined regulatory requirements, 2. Support the state's data and information collection efforts, and 3. Strengthen protections to human health and the environment. We used these 3 goals to help develop proposals that are both balanced across various perspectives and benefits and grounded in the current regulatory landscape. We also identified 4 focus areas that form the foundation of the proposals. They are crucial for realizing the regulatory alignment goals. The focus areas include 1. Data and information sharing, 2. Efficiencies, 3. Effectiveness, and 4. Equity. We will explain each of these in the next slide. The focus areas provide a lens for how we organize the proposed regulatory pathways in each program. The first is data and information sharing, which describes opportunities to improve the exchange of selected data and information between state regulatory agencies and programs. The second is efficiencies, which describes opportunities to simplify and expedite regulatory, administrative, reporting, and compliance processes. The third area is on program effectiveness, or opportunities to measure regulatory performance objectives and goals. And finally, the last focus area is on equity, which describes opportunities to ensure the inclusion of socially disadvantaged communities, farmers, and ranchers in the development, implementation, and enforcement of regulations. Within each of these focus areas, we have identified initial proposals or regulatory pathways to improve, streamline, and align regulatory programs and requirements and scope of the study. As we walk through the following regulatory pathways, please keep in mind the following discussion questions. First, what are potential implementation benefits or opportunities? What are potential implementation challenges? Which regulatory pathway within each focus area is most important to you? And finally, are there any unaddressed needs? We would appreciate your feedback on these questions, as they will help CROW to continue to refine and develop the proposals. As mentioned, you can provide your feedback during the live workshop sessions or through written feedback by sending an email to regulatoryalignmentstudy@crow.com.
For the state winery order, we have developed 8 proposed regulatory pathways, RPs or proposals, 2 for each of the 4 regulatory alignment focus areas: data and information sharing, efficiency, effectiveness, and equity. Although we'll focus on pathways that are specific to the winery order in this workshop, it's important to note that where possible, we strive to include or consider opportunities to streamline processes across agricultural programs where redundancy or overlap exists. We understand that there may be growers or producers that engage in activities that require participation in multiple water quality programs. For example, wineries who grow wine grapes or other produce on site may need coverage under both the winery order and the irrigated lands program. Although not within the scope of this study, we also acknowledge that members of the agricultural community may be subject to other water quality regulations, like the Industrial Stormwater NPDES permit. Additionally, proposals within one focus area may provide benefits to other focus areas. For example, a proposal that improves the ability of state agencies to access data across multiple programs not only improves the state's data and information sharing objectives, it may also reduce the administrative workload for both regulators and regulated entities, improving efficiency. We will look at the pathways more closely in the next slides and discuss some of the opportunities that have been identified for each. As we discuss each focus area and the proposals identified for the focus areas, keep in mind that proposals presented are not final recommendations. We hope to gain additional insight from the discussions we have today in subsequent workshops and from feedback emailed to us. We hope that you will engage with us on the call today. However, if you feel more comfortable sending us your feedback in writing, please send it to our study email inbox, regulatoryalignmentstudy@crow.com. We'll accept input and questions sent to us by 5 p.m. on July 31, 2024. The email address will be provided in the chat and will be put on the screen at the end of the workshop. You can download these workshop slides from the Regulatory Alignment Study webpage at cdfa.ca.gov/regulatory alignment. The first focus area we'll be discussing is data and information sharing. We understand there is a need to balance data and information sharing in a manner that enables efficient and effective access to data needed by regulators, the regulated community, and the general public, while being protective of sensitive personal and operational information. RP1 is intended to streamline a number of processes common to many regulatory programs: enrollment, inspection, and corrective action, through strategic cooperation and collaboration between winery order staff and staff working in other water quality programs that wineries may participate in. RP2 is intended to improve transparency around the objectives of the winery program and the progress towards achieving those objectives. In this proposal, winery program staff will periodically prepare and release status reports that summarize data generated by dischargers participating in the winery order. Some of the opportunities of RP1, which promotes strategic cross-program cooperation and collaboration, include the sharing of winery order enrollment data with other related water quality programs like the Irrigated Lands Program or the Industrial Stormwater Program, where data sharing may help identify gaps in regulatory coverage for entities requiring coverage under multiple permits or water quality orders. For example, wineries may require a permit to discharge stormwater under the Industrial Stormwater NPDES permit, since the standard industrial classification code for wineries is on the list of operations that are potentially regulated by the IGP. There are opportunities to update permit application documents like the Notice of Intent to ask for specific information related to other wine production activity occurring at the winery site that may trigger a need for regulatory coverage in addition to the winery order. For example, a winery may use process waste to irrigate crops, triggering the need for ILRP coverage, and depending on the type of crop being grown, operations may be covered under the Produce Safety Program. The proposal encourages the use of automated systems to identify regulatory needs. Electronic reporting facilitates the development of these systems and allows data to flow in multiple directions. For example, when applying for stormwater permit coverage, a discharger must provide their SIC code. Information for applicants with a winery SIC code could be automatically transmitted to the winery program to verify that the winery stormwater discharger is also participating in the winery order. The proposal also encourages cross-program collaboration on inspection and corrective action and includes suggestions on collaboration tools that could be implemented to facilitate collaboration, including message boards, email groups, shared calendars, interactive web maps, and the continuation and expansion of working group sessions. In our discussions with members of the regulated community, not just winery operators, but also growers, ranchers, and dairy operators, one of the most common criticisms we heard was that dischargers felt that the data they were producing was not being adequately used by regulators to identify concerns or improvements related to the environmental impacts of their discharges. RP2 seeks to improve transparency through the preparation and public release of program status reports. Opportunities associated with RP2 include the preparation and publication of written reports that summarize data collected under the winery order, and/or the development of a web dashboard that displays graphical representations of winery order data. We'll transition from data and information sharing to proposals that relate to efficiencies. When we speak about efficiencies, we want to include options that improve efficiency for both the regulated community and the regulators. We have identified two proposals aimed at efficiency. RP3 seeks to promote prompt transition to the winery order to expedite consolidation and enrollment, and RP4 encourages the development of an automated system for tracking winery order activity statewide with the goal of providing consistency and uniformity. Since the winery order is still relatively new, there are unique opportunities. Although the order was adopted in 2021, the deadline for new and/or unpermitted winery enrollment just came up in January. Many wineries are covered under existing individual or regional orders, and the water boards expect it will take several more years for these wineries to transition from their existing permits to the state winery order. RP3 directs winery order staff to promote prompt transition to the state winery order in an effort to expedite consolidation and enrollment. The goal of this proposal is to reduce the period of time where winery operations are fragmented across various waivers, permits, and water quality orders, and to maintain a steady pace of new enrollment to avoid enrollment bottlenecks. Opportunities associated with RP3 include continuing to engage with eligible facilities and communicating the existing incentives to prompt enrollment, highlighting elements of the winery order that provide flexibility in meeting order requirements, communicating the intention and preference to oversee newly enrolled facilities in a manner that is consistent with the state's progressive enforcement policy, and providing a streamlined path for termination of existing regulatory coverage. The state winery order seeks to streamline statewide permitting and establish statewide consistency. This streamlining and consistency is evident in the application process and in the monitoring and reporting requirements of the order. However, more can be done to streamline and improve consistency for individual processes required for ongoing compliance. Opportunities associated with RP4 include assessing the feasibility of using a single database for all winery order activity, for example, using the same system for enrollment, billing, reporting, and termination, encouraging the use of fillable web forms or PDF forms that are easily convertible to tabular data and uploaded in bulk to data storage systems, implementing mailbox rules, automated processes, and/or other functions to improve efficiency if allowing email-based reporting, and assessing the feasibility of developing forms that can be used with handwriting recognition software or are otherwise compatible with machine reading systems if allowing the use of paper forms. The next two proposals are focused on effectiveness. For purposes of the study, effectiveness relates to how effective the program is at attaining the stated objectives of the program. Over time, priorities may shift in response to trends observed across watersheds or in light of the identification of new and emerging threats to water quality. An effective water quality program should adapt to address priorities when necessary. We have identified two proposals addressing effectiveness. RP5 encourages program staff to periodically conduct a review of the program's monitoring and reporting requirements to reevaluate needs with regard to program objectives, and RP6 instructs program leadership to develop key performance indicators so that program effectiveness can be meaningfully evaluated. It is important to note that this proposal is intended to address effectiveness over the long term. The development of the winery order was a process that required evaluation under the California Environmental Quality Act, substantial involvement with industry and stakeholders, consideration of feedback received during workshops and public comment periods, and a review to ensure that regulations were consistent with the legal authority of the water boards. Changes to the order will require similar efforts and must be done thoughtfully. However, it is critical that water quality regulations adapt with changing environmental pressures and in response to the best available science and information. RP5 encourages program staff to conduct periodic review of monitoring and reporting requirements to reevaluate program needs with regard to the objectives of the program. Based on the results of the review, opportunities associated with RP5 include revisions to monitoring and reporting programs to reflect the findings, for example, imposing new reporting requirements, increasing reporting requirements for high-risk pollutants, or relaxing requirements for low-risk pollutants, streamlining and/or standardizing the process for requesting a reduction of monitoring requirements for low-risk pollutants on a facility-specific, regional, or statewide basis, and allowing dischargers to submit technical documentation that supports a reduction in monitoring or reporting for pollutants that pose little or no risk to environmental or human health based on site-specific characteristics. CROW has identified a need for a standardized rubric against which the effectiveness of water quality programs can be meaningfully and consistently evaluated. RP6 directs program leadership to develop key performance indicators for the winery order that can be used for periodic program evaluation. Opportunities associated with RP6 include the development of key performance indicators based on trends in the quality of waste discharges, development of key performance indicators based on trends in landscape scale water quality, periodic review of program data against performance indicators to identify whether performance goals are being achieved, and implementation of changes to regulations when performance objectives are not being met. Finally, we will touch on the topic of equity. Equity relates not only to the entities regulated under the winery order, but also the communities in which they operate. We have identified 2 proposals associated with equity. RP7 seeks to identify opportunities to assist socially and economically disadvantaged Tier 1 wineries, and RP8 urges program staff to consider the cumulative impacts of wineries operating in disadvantaged communities. RP7 is focused on providing assistance to socially and economically disadvantaged Tier 1 wineries. We acknowledge that, especially for small, disadvantaged businesses, regardless of the industry, regulation proposes a significant challenge and have identified opportunities to assist these businesses so that they continue to operate and grow or are able to overcome the obstacles associated with starting a new business. Opportunities associated with RP7 include promoting and spreading information on grants that may be available to disadvantaged businesses for upgrades to their process waste systems, utilizing existing water board staff or developing partnerships with external groups that can provide translation services and develop outreach materials in multiple languages, assessing the feasibility of lowering permitting fees for Tier 1 wineries classified as disadvantaged businesses, and addressing challenges faced by disadvantaged businesses directly in future revisions of the winery order through decreased fees, alternative monitoring and reporting requirements, or other provisions that reduce administrative and or cost impacts as feasible. RP8 addresses the impacts that existing and or expanding winery operations may have in disadvantaged communities and urges the water boards to consider the cumulative impacts of winery operations. Many regions in California have a rich history of wine production, and the impacts of winery operation in those areas is relatively well studied. However, California winemakers are expanding outward from these historic winemaking regions into new areas, in some cases in and around disadvantaged communities. For example, Lake County is a disadvantaged community northwest of Napa County where 2 new American viticulture areas have been established in the last 3 years. Generally, land use and or local planning decisions are based on SWO findings that consider cumulative impacts. The water boards do not oversee land use or planning authority. However, water board may be consulted during the SWO process. The water boards also have an opportunity, while reviewing permit applications, to address potential cumulative impacts in disadvantaged communities with increasing densities of winery operations through monitoring and reporting programs. Opportunities associated with RP8 include implementing additional requirements for wineries applying for coverage to operate in disadvantaged communities that function to assess cumulative impacts, requiring additional technical documentation, BMP implementation, or monitoring requirements to understand, control, and monitor for impacts that are cumulative in nature, and requiring wineries within disadvantaged communities to organize or partner with existing watershed scale or groundwater basin scale monitoring groups to evaluate changes in landscape scale water quality that are related to winery discharges.
Now that we've reviewed each of the regulatory pathways and their opportunities, as mentioned in the beginning of the workshop, please consider the following questions. First, what are potential implementation benefits or opportunities? What are potential implementation challenges? Which regulatory pathway, within each focus area, is most important to you? And finally, are there any unaddressed needs? We describe how you can provide feedback on these questions in the next slide. You have now reached the end of the workshop. We encourage you to provide written input and questions on the regulatory pathways discussed and the regulatory alignment concept paper by emailing the CRO team at regulatoryalignmentstudy@cro.com. All written feedback must be submitted by July 31st, 2024. We encourage you to participate in the live workshop sessions occurring in June and July 2024. You can register for upcoming workshop sessions through the links on the study website. Videos for each program workshops will be available on the study website at cdfa.ca.gov/regulatory alignment. Thank you so much for your time.